Do not force what your soul has already begun to release. This is one of the hardest lessons for the human ego to accept, because the ego believes that if it does not hold everything together, everything will fall apart. It tries to hold the relationship, hold the plan, hold the image, hold the answer, hold the future, hold the person, hold the opportunity, hold the door that is already closing. And the more tightly it holds, the heavier life becomes. You may know this feeling. You try harder, but your peace disappears. You explain more, but the relationship becomes colder. You organize every detail, but nothing flows. You pray, but deep down you are not surrendering. You are still negotiating with God, telling him exactly how the answer should arrive, when it should arrive, and through whom it should arrive. And then you wonder why your soul feels tired. The exhaustion may not come from the work itself. It may come from trying to force a life that no longer has the blessing of your deeper self. Fica aqui que eu vou te explicar. But before we go deeper, like this video and follow this profile. This helps this message reach more women who are learning to stop forcing what is not aligned with their soul. Now listen carefully. Not everything that resists you is an enemy. Sometimes resistance is guidance. Sometimes delay is protection. Sometimes silence is not punishment. Sometimes a closed door is not rejection. Sometimes what you call failure is the way God prevents you from building your whole life on a foundation that could not carry your future. The ego wants proof before surrender. The soul often receives direction only after surrender. This is why forcing becomes so painful. When the ego wants something, it often believes that desire alone is proof that the thing must belong to it. If I want this relationship, I must make it work. If I want this opportunity, I must push harder. If I want this answer, I must keep searching. If I want this life, I must not stop until reality obeys me. But the soul has another rhythm. The soul does not move by panic. It does not move by obsession. It does not move by the fear of losing control. It moves through meaning, through intuition, through symbols, through quiet inner knowing, through doors that open without violence, and through doors that close, even when the ego does not understand. In my work with the psyche, I have seen that the human being often suffers not only because life is difficult, but because the ego refuses to accept the movement of life. The ego wants certainty. It wants a map. It wants to know that if it does everything correctly, nothing painful will happen. But no human life can be lived that way. There is always mystery. There is always uncertainty. There is always a deeper current beneath the conscious plan. Many people call that current fate. Others call it the unconscious, and many call it God. Whatever name you use, there is a wisdom operating beneath the surface of your life that the ego cannot command. You can participate with it. You can listen to it. You can align yourself with it. But you cannot force it to obey your fear. When you try to force life, you usually lose contact with this deeper guidance. You stop listening. You stop noticing the signs. You become so focused on making one outcome happen that you no longer ask whether the outcome is still alive. You stop asking whether the path has peace. You stop asking whether your body contracts every time you move toward it. You stop asking whether the door is opening through grace or only through your exhaustion. And this is where many women become anxious. They feel that something is no longer flowing, but instead of stopping, they push harder. They feel that a relationship is draining their soul, but instead of listening, they try to become more patient, more attractive, more understanding, more silent, more useful. They feel that a career path is losing meaning, but instead of questioning the direction, they make a new plan, set a new goal, and force themselves to continue. They feel that a dream has become heavy, but instead of asking if the dream has changed, they punish themselves for losing motivation. The ego calls this discipline. Sometimes the soul calls it self-abandonment. There is a difference between effort and force. Effort has life in it. Effort may be difficult, but it does not destroy your center. It asks for devotion, practice, patience, humility, and courage. It can make you tired, but it does not make you false. It may stretch you, but it does not make you betray yourself. Force feels different. Force has desperation in it. Force makes your body tense. Force makes your mind obsess. Force makes you afraid to pause because if you pause, you might hear the truth. Force often comes from the ego trying to keep alive something that the soul has already outgrown. This is why the first question is not, how do I make this happen? The deeper question is, am I being guided or am I forcing? You can feel the difference in the body. When something is guided, there may still be fear, but there is also a quiet thread of peace. You may not know the whole path, but something inside you recognizes the direction. You may be challenged, but not spiritually violated. You may need patience, but not self-erasure. The path may require work, but it does not require you to become someone you are not. When something is forced, the body often knows before the mind admits it. The chest tightens, the stomach contracts, the sleep becomes restless. The mind keeps replaying the same fear. You feel increasingly separate from yourself. The more you push, the smaller your inner world becomes. This is not weakness, this is information. The body often becomes the messenger when the ego refuses to listen. A woman may say, I just need to try harder. But if every attempt leaves her emptier, if every conversation takes more dignity from her, if every plan demands more betrayal of her own soul, then perhaps the issue is not that she lacks strength. Perhaps she is spending strength on what God is asking her to release. This is one of the most painful moments in spiritual and psychological life. The moment you realize that surrender does not always mean receiving what you wanted. Sometimes, surrender means allowing God to remove what your ego was still trying to worship. A relationship, a role, a plan, a version of yourself, a future you imagined so many times that losing it feels like losing your identity. The ego says, if this does not happen, my life will collapse. But sometimes the soul says, if this continues, you will collapse. And God, in His mercy, may close the door before you have the courage to walk away from it yourself. This is why delay can be sacred. A delay may feel like humiliation to the ego. You wanted the answer now. You wanted the relationship to become clear now. You wanted the opportunity to open now. You wanted proof now. You wanted certainty now. But the deeper life does not always move according to the ego's calendar. There are moments when nothing moves because you are not ready. There are moments when nothing moves because the other person is not ready. There are moments when nothing moves because the path is not prepared. There are moments when nothing moves because the thing you are asking for would imprison you if it arrived too soon. And there are moments when nothing moves because God is protecting you from a desire that came from fear, not from truth. The ego hates this. The ego wants movement at any cost. It would rather have a wrong answer than no answer. It would rather stay in a painful situation than sit in uncertainty. It would rather control the wrong door than wait for the right one to open. But the soul is not saved by frantic movement. The soul is saved by alignment. This is where faith becomes real. Not when life obeys your plan, but when life interrupts your plan and you choose not to become bitter. Faith is easy when the door opens. Faith is more difficult when the door closes and you do not yet understand why. Faith is not pretending that you are not hurt. Faith is not smiling while something inside you is grieving. Faith is the quiet decision to say, I do not understand this yet, but I will not force what God is asking me to release. That sentence changes the inner posture. It moves you from panic into humility. And humility is not weakness. Humility is the moment the ego stops pretending to be God. Many people live as if the entire universe depends on their control. They carry everything in their nervous system. They worry before sleeping. They wake up already tense. They rehearse conversations. They imagine disasters. They check, push, chase, explain, insist, and negotiate. Then they call this responsibility. But responsibility without surrender becomes spiritual exhaustion. You are responsible for your choices. You are responsible for your honesty. You are responsible for your actions. You are responsible for the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you treat your body, the way you honor your values, and the way you respond to what life brings. But you are not responsible for controlling every outcome. You are not responsible for making someone love you. You are not responsible for forcing a door to open before it's time. You are not responsible for carrying tomorrow before tomorrow exists. You are not responsible for proving to God that your plan is better than His timing. There is peace in knowing where your responsibility ends. and there is pain in trying to control what was never yours to control. A woman may suffer for years because she confuses surrender with defeat. She believes that if she stops forcing, she has failed. If she stops chasing, she is lost. If she stops explaining, she has given up. If she stops trying to make the relationship work, she has not loved enough. If she stops fighting for the plan, she has abandoned her dream. But sometimes, surrender is not giving up on life. It is giving up the illusion that only one form of life can save you. This is very different. When you surrender, you do not become passive. You become available. You stop spending all your energy forcing one door and begin to notice what God may be arranging behind you. You stop trying to resurrect what is dead and begin to feel where life is still breathing. You stop confusing obsession with devotion. You stop mistaking anxiety for intuition. This is a deep psychological movement. The ego says, I must make life happen. The soul says, I must listen to where life is asking to move through me. That listening requires silence, and silence can be frightening. Many people avoid silence because silence reveals what constant effort hides. When you finally stop forcing, you may feel grief. You may feel anger. You may feel the emptiness that the old pursuit was covering. You may realize that the relationship you kept fighting for was also protecting you from facing loneliness. You may realize that the career you kept chasing was protecting you from asking what you truly wanted. You may realize that the plan you kept defending was built more from fear than from calling. This is why the ego keeps moving. It is afraid of what stillness will reveal. But God often speaks in the place the ego avoids, not always through a loud voice, not always through a miracle, often through a quiet inner knowing, a strange peace, a discomfort that does not go away, a repeated sign, a dream, a closed door, a conversation, a delay, a sudden loss of energy, or a path that becomes heavy no matter how much you try to bless it with your will. The soul is always communicating. The question is whether you are listening or only negotiating. Many women pray while still clinging. They say, God, guide me. But when guidance comes as a closed door, they call it rejection. They say, God, show me the truth. But when the truth reveals that the person is unavailable, they try to explain it away. They say, God, lead me. But when the path becomes slower, they panic and return to control. This is human. Do not shame yourself for it. The ego does not surrender easily. It has spent years trying to keep you safe. It learned that control prevents pain. It learned that planning reduces uncertainty. It learned that effort brings approval. It learned that holding tightly keeps abandonment away. So when you ask the ego to surrender, it feels as if you are asking it to die. In a way you are. Not the death of your life, the death of the false ruler inside you. The ego must stop acting as if it can see the whole road. It must learn to become a servant of the deeper self, not the master of the soul. In spiritual language, it must bow before God. In psychological language, it must recognize that consciousness is not the whole psyche, and the conscious will is not the whole truth. This bowing is painful, but it is also liberating, because the moment you stop pretending to control everything, you can finally receive guidance. A clenched hand cannot receive. A clenched mind cannot hear. A clenched heart cannot trust. This is why life sometimes makes you tired before it makes you free. Exhaustion can be the beginning of surrender. Not because God wants you broken, but because the ego may only stop when it has no energy left to maintain the illusion. You tried everything. You explained everything. You planned everything. You held everything. You forced everything. And still, peace did not come. At some point, a wiser part of you whispers, maybe this is not the way. That whisper is sacred. Do not ignore it. Sometimes the first sign of divine guidance is not a new opportunity. It is the loss of energy for the old one. What once excited you now drains you. What once felt meaningful now feels empty. What once gave you direction now feels like a costume you keep wearing for other people. This does not always mean you must leave immediately. It means you must listen. Energy is one of the languages of the soul. When the soul gives energy, you may still feel challenged, but something inside you remains alive. When the soul withdraws energy, the same actions become heavy. The body moves, but the spirit is absent. You can continue performing, but something essential no longer participates. This withdrawal of energy is often misread as laziness, weakness, or lack of discipline, but sometimes it is guidance. A tree cannot grow in the wrong soil simply because it tries harder. You can water it more, speak to it more, demand more of it, compare it to other trees, and still it will suffer if the soil does not match its nature. Move it to the right soil, and life returns in a way that no amount of force could produce. Human beings are not so different. You may be trying to bloom in soil that was never meant for your becoming. This can happen in relationships. You keep trying to be loved by someone who only activates your wound. You become softer, quieter, more patient, more forgiving, more available. You keep watering the ground, but nothing real grows. At some point, the soul withdraws energy. You still care, but you no longer feel alive there. Something in you knows that love without reciprocity becomes a slow disappearance. This can happen in work. You follow a path that once made sense, perhaps because it offered security, approval, or identity. Then one day the soul begins to feel absent. The tasks remain, the title remains, the income may remain, but meaning has left the room. You keep showing up, but something inside you is no longer there. This can happen with dreams too. A dream may begin as true and later become a prison because you outgrew the version of yourself who wanted it. The ego may continue forcing the old dream because it fears being without a dream, but the soul may already be preparing another direction. This is why you must listen when life stops flowing. Do not panic immediately. Do not assume you are being punished. Do not turn every delay into proof that you are failing. Slow down and ask, where has my energy disappeared? What am I still forcing? What part of me already knows the truth but fears the consequences of admitting it? These questions create a space where God can act. Not because God was absent before, but because control was too loud. When the ego becomes quieter, guidance becomes more audible. If this message is helping you recognize where you have been forcing life, like this video now. Let it be a small act of honesty with your own soul. Now let us speak about the signs you ignore before life forces you to stop. Very rarely does a path collapse without warning. Usually, there were whispers before the rupture. You felt tired for reasons you could not explain. You had less joy. You noticed tension in your body when you thought about the person, the place, the decision, or the plan. You lost enthusiasm, but told yourself to keep going. You sensed that something was not right, but you did not want to disappoint anyone. You felt God asking for your attention, but you were afraid of what obedience might cost. So you continued. This is what the ego does. It explains away the soul. It says, I am just tired. It says, every relationship is difficult. It says, every job is exhausting. It says, I should be grateful. It says, I cannot start over. It says, maybe I am asking too much. It says, if I try harder, this will change. Sometimes these sentences are true. Difficulty alone does not mean the path is wrong. But when the same discomfort returns again and again, when your body keeps signaling, when your peace keeps disappearing, when your intuition keeps knocking, you must become more honest. If you do not listen to the whisper, life may have to speak louder. This is not punishment. It is correction. The unconscious seeks balance. When the conscious ego moves too far away from truth, the deeper psyche begins to compensate. At first, the compensation may be subtle. A dream, a fatigue, a repeated thought, a discomfort that will not leave, a loss of interest, a moment of sadness after something that should have made you happy. If these signals are ignored, they may become stronger. The body may begin to carry what the mind refuses to admit. Sleep may become difficult. Anxiety may increase. The heart may feel heavy. You may become irritable, numb, restless, or strangely disconnected from the life you are trying to maintain. The soul will use whatever language you are finally willing to hear. Sometimes it uses the body. Sometimes it uses circumstances. Sometimes it uses a door closing so completely that the ego cannot pretend anymore. A person may lose the job they were too afraid to leave. A relationship may end after years of inner knowing. A plan may collapse because it was built on approval rather than truth. At first, the ego calls this disaster. Later, the soul may recognize it as mercy. This does not mean every loss is easy. It does not mean every collapse feels good. It does not mean grief disappears because you believe God is guiding you. Grief is still grief, but grief can coexist with guidance. You may cry and still be protected. You may feel lost and still be redirected. You may not understand and still be held by something wiser than your present fear. This is the mystery of surrender. The ego wants God to guide through comfort. Sometimes God guides through interruption. The ego wants God to confirm the plan. Sometimes God dismantles the plan. The ego wants God to bless the attachment. Sometimes God removes the attachment because it was becoming an idol. This is especially painful when the thing removed was something you loved or something you thought you needed. A woman may believe she cannot live without a certain person. She may believe that if this relationship ends, she will not survive the emptiness. So she keeps forcing connection, even after her dignity has begun to disappear. She ignores the signs, the distance, the confusion, the lack of reciprocity. She calls her anxiety intuition, but often it is the soul begging her to stop abandoning herself. Then the relationship collapses. At first, she thinks God has taken something from her. Later, she may realize God returned her to herself. This is not easy truth, but it is often sacred truth. Sometimes, the wrong path must become impossible before the right path becomes visible. The ego would prefer to decorate the wrong path. It wants to paint the cracked wall, polish the broken structure, improve the appearance of what is no longer stable. But if the foundation is broken, decoration does not save the house. The structure must be examined. Sometimes, it must be dismantled. This is what happens in the psyche. When a life is built on fear, approval, false identity, inherited attachment, or desperate attachment, it may stand for a while. It may even look successful from the outside. But inside, cracks begin to appear. Anxiety appears, emptiness appears, repetition appears, conflict appears. The soul begins to say, "This cannot carry who you are becoming." The ego calls this crisis. The self may call it reconstruction. God may call it deliverance. A necessary collapse is not the end of your life. It is the end of the form that could no longer hold your life. Think of the seed. If the seed could speak, it might say that the breaking of its shell feels like destruction. The old form cracks. The familiar boundary dissolves. Something presses outward into darkness. From the perspective of the seed, this may feel like death, but from the perspective of life, it is germination. Some parts of you cannot grow unless the old shell breaks. This is why you should not rush to judge every collapse as failure. Sometimes the collapse is the beginning of a deeper obedience. Not obedience to fear, obedience to the life God placed inside you. When a path collapses, ask not only, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, "What false structure can no longer remain?" Ask, "What truth did I ignore?" Ask, "What was I forcing that no longer had peace?" Ask, "Where is God making it impossible for me to keep betraying myself?" These questions do not remove pain. They give pain a direction, and pain with direction becomes transformation. This is how the soul matures, not by receiving everything it wants, but by learning to trust what is revealed when what it wanted is taken away. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes after a door closes. While the door was open, you kept pouring energy into it. You kept imagining that one more effort, one more conversation, one more strategy, one more sacrifice would finally make it work. Once it closes, you may finally see how much of yourself you were losing there. The closed door becomes a mirror. It shows you the places where you were negotiating against your own soul. It shows you how fear disguised itself as devotion. It shows you how control disguised itself as faith. It shows you how forcing disguised itself as love. And then, slowly, a new prayer begins inside you. Not, "God, give me what I want," but "God, make me honest enough to receive what is true." That prayer changes everything, because truth is not always what the ego wants, but truth is where the soul can breathe. When the wrong path begins to fall apart, many people feel as if God has abandoned them. But often, what feels like abandonment is the removal of an illusion that could no longer carry the life your soul was meant to live. The ego does not understand this at first. It interprets pain as threat, endings as punishment, delays as rejection, and any change of plan as evidence that life is working against you. Yet the deeper soul knows something the ego cannot easily accept. Not every loss is against you. Some losses protect you from becoming smaller than you were meant to be. This is where synchronicity begins to appear. When you stop forcing one specific direction, you begin to notice quiet arrangements you could not see before. A conversation arrives at the right time. A sentence in a book seems to speak directly to your situation. A person reappears with information that changes your perspective. A door closes, and although another one does not open immediately, small signs begin forming a path through the fog. These moments are rarely loud. They do not always look like miracles. Sometimes, they are subtle enough that only the soul recognizes them. The inner world and the outer world are not as separate as the rational ego imagines. There are moments when a transformation inside you begins to be reflected by the circumstances around you. When something in your psyche becomes ready, you start recognizing opportunities that were invisible before. When an old identity dissolves, people, symbols, conversations, and situations begin to speak to the woman you are becoming. The ego calls this coincidence. The soul recognizes meaning. This does not mean you should search anxiously for signs in every detail. That can become another form of control. A frightened ego can turn spirituality into superstition, constantly trying to decode life because it cannot tolerate uncertainty. That is not surrender. That is panic using sacred language. True signs do not usually demand obsession. They carry a quiet weight. They bring recognition. They may not give you the whole map, but they illuminate the next faithful step. When God acts through circumstances, He rarely explains the whole story at once. Guidance often comes in fragments: a closed door, a delayed answer, an unexpected conversation, a sudden loss of desire for an old path, a strange peace about something that should have frightened you, or an inner knowing that keeps returning no matter how much you try to ignore it. The ego wants the entire plan. God often gives only the next step, and this requires trust. The ego says, "Show me how everything will end, and then I will believe." But faith usually works in the opposite direction. You trust enough to take one step, and after that step, a little more of the road is revealed. The path does not always appear while you are thinking about it. Sometimes it appears while you are walking. Not forcing. Walking. Forcing is born from panic. Walking is born from trust. Forcing tries to bend reality until it obeys fear. Walking responds to the light that has already been given, even when that light only reveals a few steps ahead. A woman who lets God act does not become inactive. She becomes more attentive. She still chooses, speaks, works, takes responsibility, and opens the doors that are hers to open. But she no longer tries to break down doors that God may be closing. She stops sacrificing her peace to prove that the ego knows the way. She no longer mistakes anxiety for obedience. This kind of surrender carries a deeply feminine wisdom, not because it is weak, but because it knows how to receive. It understands that life is not only conquered, it is also listened to. It respects the seasons of the soul. It knows that waiting can be active when the waiting is conscious. It knows that silence can be fertile when it is not avoidance, but reverence. A woman who learns this becomes less available to chaos. She stops running after every uncertainty. She stops chasing every person who withdraws. She stops interpreting every delay as a personal failure. She stops giving her nervous system to stories that have not yet finished unfolding. Instead, she begins to ask a more sacred question. Is God asking me to move now, or is He asking me to trust? This question requires discernment. There are moments when action is necessary. You may need to speak, leave, decide, create, organize, ask for help, repair something, or place a boundary. Surrender is not an excuse for passivity. It is not sitting inside a burning house and calling the fire divine timing. It is not tolerating disrespect while waiting for God to change someone who refuses to change. It is not avoiding responsibility while using beautiful spiritual language. True surrender is not paralysis. It is alignment. It knows when to move and when to stop insisting. It knows when to plant and when to wait. It knows when speech is needed and when silence protects dignity. It knows when something is alive enough to be fought for, and when something has already ended in the soul long before it ended in the world. This discernment does not come from the mind alone. The ego, by itself, is often too frightened, impatient, proud, or attached to see clearly. You must listen to the whole psyche, the body, the dreams, the repeated emotions, the presence or absence of energy, the quality of peace, the pattern of circumstances, and the quiet movement of God beneath everything. Peace is one of the deepest signs. I am not speaking of excitement, obsession, or the temporary relief that comes when the ego gets exactly what it wanted. I am speaking of a quieter peace, sometimes so subtle that you almost miss it. A peace that can appear even when the road is uncertain. A peace that says, "This is difficult, but I am not betraying myself." A peace that whispers, "I do not yet know how everything will unfold, but something in me is no longer fighting the truth." This peace is different from comfort. Comfort appears when the ego receives what it desired. Peace appears when the soul aligns with what is true. Sometimes the true path is uncomfortable. It may ask for grief, departure, waiting, beginning again, or disappointing people who benefited from the old version of you. Yet, beneath the discomfort, there is a silent rightness, as if you have finally stopped walking against your own life. This is the peace you must learn to recognize. A woman may remain in the wrong place because it is familiar, approved, predictable, and easy to explain. The ego feels safe there because it knows the pattern, but the soul becomes restless. Another woman may step into a new direction with fear trembling through her body and still feel a deeper peace underneath that fear. The ego shakes, but the soul breathes. So do not judge guidance only by the presence of fear. Fear can appear on the right path. The more important question is not, "Am I afraid?" The deeper question is there peace beneath this fear? When you are forcing, fear becomes frantic. It makes you grasp, chase, control, over-explain, and lose yourself. When you are being guided, fear may still be present, but it does not possess the whole soul. Something steady remains. There is a sense of being held. There is a quiet understanding that one step is enough for today. This is often how God acts. He does not remove every uncertainty. He gives enough grace for the next faithful step. A woman who understands this stops demanding that life reveal everything at once. She no longer uses anxiety as proof that she must control more. Delay stops feeling like humiliation and begins to look like a place where the soul is being formed. Waiting can purify desire. When something does not arrive immediately, you begin to discover whether you truly wanted it or whether you were trying to escape fear. You discover whether a relationship was love or attachment, whether a dream was calling or performance, whether an opportunity was aligned with the soul or merely flattering to the ego, whether your prayer came from trust or from desperation. This is why God's timing often frustrates the ego. It reveals the hidden motive behind the desire. If the desire is obsession, waiting exposes it. If the desire is true, waiting deepens it without destroying your center. You may still want the thing, you may still pray for it, but you no longer lose yourself while waiting. You do not hand over your dignity. You do not abandon your body. You do not turn the desire into an idol. You remain more connected to God than to the outcome. That is surrender. To desire without worshiping the desire. To act without violating the path. To pray without trying to control the answer. To wait without collapsing. To release without letting loss become bitterness. The ego believes surrender will make you empty, but true surrender often does the opposite. It gathers back the energy that was scattered through chasing, explaining, worrying, rehearsing, and controlling. It calls you back to the center, and from the center, you begin to hear. Many people discover this only after they stop insisting. At first, they fear that if they stop pushing, nothing will happen. They imagine that life will forget them, that God will remain silent, that everything will dissolve without their constant control. But when they finally stop, something unexpected begins. They notice how tired they were. They see how much of their effort came from fear. They recognize who only stayed while they were abandoning themselves. They understand which doors required the loss of dignity to remain open. They feel where peace returns. They sense where energy begins to move again. Surrender did not make them powerless. It made them honest. And honesty is the beginning of guidance. God cannot guide the version of you that is pretending. The unconscious cannot help a persona that refuses to tell the truth. The soul cannot reveal the next step while the ego is busy defending the old one. So tell the truth, not dramatically, not harshly, quietly, with courage. Admit that you are tired of forcing. Admit that a relationship has taken more peace than it has given. Admit that a plan no longer carries life. Admit that you have been afraid to stop because stopping might reveal grief. Admit that you confused control with faith. This truth is not the end. It is an opening. After truth comes listening. After listening comes the next step. Not the whole road, only the next step. That step may be a conversation. It may be silence. It may be rest. It may be leaving. It may be waiting without chasing. It may be working with more devotion because you realize the path is alive, only slow. It may be releasing a fantasy while still honoring the deeper desire. It may be asking for help. It may be forgiving yourself for forcing what you did not yet know how to surrender. God does not usually ask you to understand everything before taking the next step. He asks for trust. And trust is built through small acts. You trust when you do not send the desperate message. You trust when you do not return to the door that is already closed. You trust when you do the honest work that belongs to today. You trust when you rest because the body has asked for rest. You trust when you say no because your soul already said no. You trust when you allow silence to exist without filling it with panic. You trust when you allow what is not yours to leave. This does not mean you will feel peaceful all the time. You are human. You may still cry. You may still miss what left. You may wake up wondering if you made the right choice. The old impulse to control, chase, insist, or prove may return. When it does, do not attack yourself. Come back to the center. Place your hand over your heart and say, I do not need to force what God is asking me to trust. Let that sentence become prayer, not a prayer of defeat, a prayer of alignment. Use it when a door closes, when someone withdraws, when an answer delays, when plans change, when your body is tired of carrying tomorrow, or when the ego wants to control the entire road. Then ask, what is mine to do today? This question keeps surrender grounded. It protects you from passivity. Perhaps what belongs to you today is rest. Perhaps it is honest work. Perhaps it is a necessary conversation, a practical decision, forgiveness toward yourself, or the courage to wait without turning waiting into despair. Do what is yours. Return to God what belongs to God. This is the balance. Many people suffer because they reverse this order. They try to give God the decision they must make, while carrying the timing, the results, the hearts of other people, and the future they cannot control. They say they are waiting on God, but they refuse the honest step. They say they trust, while trying to manage everything that was never placed in their hands. Take back what is your responsibility. Release what is not. Your responsibility is to obey the truth already revealed. God's responsibility is to lead what you cannot yet see. Your responsibility is the next faithful step. God's responsibility is the timing of the road. Your responsibility is to stop betraying your own soul. God's responsibility is to arrange what your ego could never organize through force. This is not easy, but it is freeing. The moment you return the future to God, the present becomes lighter. You no longer need to live 10 years in one night. You no longer need to solve every possibility before sleeping. You do not need to know how the story ends before taking the next step. You can breathe, listen, wait without becoming empty, and act without becoming violent toward your own soul. This is the peace that begins when you stop forcing. It may not arrive immediately. At first, surrender can feel like withdrawal. Your nervous system may be so accustomed to chaos that peace feels strange. You may even feel tempted to create a problem just to return to familiar intensity. Be patient with yourself. The body must learn that peace is not danger. The soul must learn that it can rest without losing direction. The ego must learn that God can act without its constant interference. This learning takes time. But each time you choose trust instead of force, something changes within you. When you stop chasing what withdraws, you recover dignity. When you stop breaking yourself against a closed door, you recover energy. When you allow God to act in His timing, you recover faith. When you listen before moving, you draw closer to the life that truly belongs to you. Now I want to leave you with a practice. For the next 7 days, whenever you feel the urge to force something, pause before acting. Do not judge the impulse. Listen to it. Ask what it fears. Perhaps it fears abandonment. Perhaps it fears failure. Perhaps it fears being forgotten. Perhaps it believes that if you stop, what you desire will disappear. Then ask, is this action coming from peace or from panic? If it comes from panic, wait for a moment. Not forever, only long enough to return to yourself. Place one hand over your chest and say, God, show me what is mine to do, and give me the courage to release what is not mine to control. Then listen. If a clear action comes with groundedness, take that action. If no action comes, remain still. Let silence work. Let the impulse pass. Allow deeper guidance to rise beneath the noise. At night, write 3 sentences in a journal. Today I tried to force. Beneath that force I was afraid of. What I now return to God is. This simple practice will show you where the ego is still gripping. It will also show how guidance begins to appear when control softens. Before we close, think of one woman who is exhausted from forcing everything. A woman who keeps trying to hold a relationship, a plan, a person, a door, or a future that has become too heavy. Send this video to her. She may not need another strategy. She may need permission to stop confusing force with faith. Now write in the comments the city where you are watching from, and tell me if this message made sense to you. What have you been trying to force? A relationship, a decision, a career path, an answer, a future, or a version of yourself that no longer has peace? If this reflection spoke to your soul, like this video and follow this profile. Here, we continue exploring the unconscious, the feminine soul, anxiety, faith, and the journey back to yourself. When something has lost its peace, you do not need to keep holding it with both hands as if your life depends on it. If a relationship, a door, a plan, or a future only survives through your self-abandonment, then perhaps what you are calling perseverance has quietly become a form of inner betrayal. A delay is not always rejection, and surrender is not the same as defeat. Sometimes God closes what your ego still wants open because He is protecting the woman you are becoming. So do what belongs to you with honesty. Release what belongs to God. And when your ego begins to panic because it cannot see the entire road, remember this. The deepest guidance rarely arrives through force. It comes through listening, through peace, through signs, through closed doors, through inner truth, and through the quiet certainty that you are being led even before you understand the way. Stop forcing. Let God act. And little by little, the life that could never be sustained by control begins to reveal itself through grace. I see you in my next video.